Thank you for tuning in to RTM Nation Online, where we believe that you will receive the abundance of peace, prosperity, security, stability, health, healing, and truth. If you would like to learn more about the ministry, click the link below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into the message.
If you would get your Bible set on John chapter 8, we're going to start on verse 51. We've been talking about a decision to change, and we've made our way to what we call getting a handle on your spirit by spiritual self-control. We said that we can explain that getting spiritual self-control in 5 steps. We're on step number 4. The other steps were, starting in step number 1, you gain spiritual self-control by making sure you avoid those things you know trip you up. The second thing we talked about is that you must have a belief in God, and then you must rest in that belief. Now, the third thing that we walked through was we should all recognize or come to take it as the truth that God is not holding us in a position of condemnation. The world may condemn us, but God doesn't. We may actually condemn ourselves, but God does not. The fourth thing is this. We must know that our past does not limit God. We read this at the end of last week, but we're going to go ahead and dive into it again, starting in verse 51, keeping in mind that, yes, we've already come through Jesus and the woman caught in adultery and all that good stuff. 51, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. He says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, if a man keep my saying, he shall never see death. Then saith the Jews unto him, Now we know that thou hast a devil. Abraham is dead, and the prophets, and thou sayest, If a man keep my saying, he will never taste death. Art thou greater than our father Abraham, which is dead, and the prophets are dead? Whom makest thou thyself?" We have all these great men in our past, Jesus. Now you're coming and saying that, in our opinion, that we're greater than them. Who are you making yourself out to be? Jesus answered, "If I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father that honoreth me, of whom ye say that he is your God. Yet ye have not known him, but I know him, and if I should say I know him not, I shall be a liar like unto you. But I know him and keep his saying. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. Then said the Jews unto him, Art thou not yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham?" Jesus, you're not even 50. Abraham lived so many years ago. How can you possibly say you even had any personal relation with Abraham? And verse 58, read that with me. Jesus said unto them, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am." Before Abraham was, I am. The Message Bible of verse 58 reads like this. "Believe me," Jesus said, "I am who I am long before Abraham was anything." If we were to examine that 2-word statement, I am, here is what Jesus is saying. By saying I am, he's saying, I exist without explicit limits. I am means my existence is time inclusive. I exist, and the time that you know of came out of me. I didn't come out of time. Amen. I am means I was, am, and will be simultaneously. Jesus is saying I was, I am, and I will be all at the same time. I am means that I am limitless, I am endless, I am eternal, I am boundless. So when Jesus is telling them about meeting Abraham, recognize his perspective. Even though he's speaking about Abraham specifically, he's not talking about Abraham only. When he says that before Abraham was, I am, he's actually walking them back through time all the way to the beginning, even though they're not getting it. In other words, before Abraham was, and before his daddy Terah was, I am. Before Shem and before Noah, I am. Before Seth and before Abel and before Cain, I am. Before Eve and before Adam, I am. Before the ground that you stand on was, I am. Before the sun, before the moon, before the stars, I am. Before the Father started time as you know it, I am. That's Jesus' perspective. That's his view. And if that is Jesus' perspective and his view, we must recognize that when it comes to us and our past, that is how Jesus can be so confident that a relationship with him can make our lives better. Amen. Because he sees who we were, who we are, and who we can be. Amen. Because he is the I am. Looking at those I ams from God's perspective, there are 3 examples that come to mind that help us zero in on getting a better perspective on our past. And how our past, we have to make sure we're clear, it does not limit God. Amen. The first one we're going to start with is the Samaritan woman at the well. That's going to be in John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, we're going to start at verse 1. And once again, we're going to take it slow. Going to be sort of a Bible study-ish today, but that's okay. Once again, we're going to take it slow. You know what else? Let me tell you something. Remember last week we had NFL Day, right? And I wore my shirt, and them jokers lost. I said to myself, all that trash I talked, at least y'all could have won that Sunday. I kid y'all not. We were left here and went to a restaurant. I walk in the restaurant just as the other team's getting ready to kick the field goal to beat us. They kick the field goal. We lose the game. From the corner of the restaurant, I hear somebody yell, "Oh yeah, I hope he's sitting at my table." This is the waiter. I hope he's sitting, that guy over there, I hope he is sitting at my table. And guess whose table I was sitting at? His table. That joker rode me through the whole meal. But you know, you got to stick with your team. But they could have won the day I talked all that trash. They couldn't do nothing for me. That's why you got tied into the church. That's why you got to trust in Jesus. Amen. Don't trust in the NFL. All right. If you have a topical Bible, it says the woman of Samaria, starting in verse 1. When therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee. And he must needs to go through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat down on the well. and it was about the 6th hour, so it was about noon. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat. So just a quick overview right there. They've come to a place. Jesus is tired. It's the middle of the day. He wants something to drink. Obviously, he was hungry because they had went into the city, the disciples, to buy lunch. Here comes this woman of Samaria to get water out of the well. Jesus said, Hey, girl, can I have some water? Verse 9. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which I am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Now, we're going to come back to this part, but there is a special context in the fact that she asked him those questions about being a woman of Samaria that helps us with us identifying certain things about the past, in particular, our past. But let's continue on and let's go all the way down to verse 12. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman says unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? Question. There are two things that we want to make sure we get a handle on while we're talking about the past. And here they are. Number one, and it's because we want to close the book on these things. We want to make sure that there's no question lingering in our mind on these two things once we're done. Number one, the first view is the way we view our past as restricting God. Our past doesn't restrict God, but sometimes we can view it as having the ability to. Now let's go back up to verse 9 and let's talk about this woman of Samaria. My understanding of history between the Samaritans of the Jews is as follows, because it helps to understand this, because it says in verse 9, she says, I'm a woman of Samaria. The Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Way back in the Jacob and Joseph time period, the Jewish people were divided into two territories, a northern territory and a southern territory. The northern territory became those folks known as Samaritans. The southern territory were what you call more traditional Jews. But what's the split? Why do they have such a rift? Well, the northern territory folks, those folks that became Samaritans, they also got involved in idol worship. So they still believed in God. They still knew all the history because that was their heritage. But they didn't just worship God only. They had some other things that they got into. So the people that were true blue Jews had no dealings with those people. That gives some clarity in the fact that even though she says, I'm a Samaritan and you have no dealings with me as a Jew, she can also say, are you greater than our father Jacob? Because they all come from the same line. If you're not careful, you can read that as she's someone that's completely an outcast. But she's not. It's just that in her path of life, her Samaritan people got involved in other things in addition to God. You follow me so far? When you look at verse number 10, Jesus is getting ready to have some in-depth conversation with this woman. Now, she's a Samaritan, And there are other people in that community, probably everybody in that community that have the mindset that she was talking to would not even give her the time of day. But Jesus is going to talk to her. Why? Because the stigma of your past, because the condition of your history has nothing to do with the way Jesus values his relationship with you. Because my past has nothing to do with the way Jesus values his relationship with me. Remember, he is the I am. So before I was, he put a value on me. If he put a value on me before I was, nothing that I did, nothing that I am doing, nothing that I can do will cause that value to be altered. He valued me before I even knew me. He valued me before my father knew my mother. He valued, you know the deal, before my grandparents and the person after that joker, he already valued me. So it doesn't matter to him that she's a woman of Samaria. All he knows is that she has a value to God, so she's worth talking to. Amen. In verse 10, he's telling her that he would, if she knew who he was, that he would give her some living water. Then she turns around and says, the well is deep and you have nothing to draw from. He's talking to her about spiritual things. She's talking about the physical. She's saying, I'm standing at the well with you. Now she knows she bought a pot, but you didn't bring anything to draw from. You see, when Jesus interacts with us, it's not a state that he's looking to get something from us. He's not looking to draw from anything that we have. His condition with her, his statement to her is, baby, I'm looking to make a deposit in your well, not withdraw from it. Amen. I'm looking to deposit living water from God into your heart that'll change and enrich your life. That's why you're valuable for me to come and talk to. Not for what I can get from you, but what God can deliver into your life. Amen. Your past don't block that. Amen. Your past don't hinder that. Why? Because I have valued you and made a determination that you're worth it before you even showed up. Amen. Now, by the time we get to verse 15, in verse 15, the woman says, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. And right now, she's still being physical. Give me this water. I think it's a good idea that I don't ever have to be thirsty again. Plus, you're telling me I don't have to walk my behind back up here with this pail in the middle of the day in the hot sun and get some water? Oh, I'm with that. Give me this living water that you're talking about. Now notice Jesus, though. Verse 16. He says unto her, go call thy husband and come hither. What an interesting reply. He's been offering her water the whole time. Now that she says, okay, give me this water, he says, go get your husband. That's not an answer to her question. Now we know Jesus is the master of parables and saying stuff that just come out of left field. But what do I want us to take from this? Jesus is getting ready to identify her past. But in his identification of her past, he never pushes her away. Even though he's going to reveal to her that he recognizes what her past is, her past condition still has nothing to do with how he values the relationship he wants to have with her. Here we go. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, thou hast said well, I have no husband. 18 says, for thou have had 5 husbands. And he whom thou art with now is not thy husband. Thou hast said truly. The woman says unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Notice a couple things. In her past, Christ has identified, not only is the man you're with now not your husband, but you've had 5. Now, it doesn't give us a lot more details in that, but we can make a couple assumptions and take a few quick rabbit trails on what that could mean. Number 1, she could have had 5 husbands before and they all could have died, right? Could have been the case. She could have had 5 previous husbands and they all could have dismissed her for some reason. Something happened in the relationship, and based on how their historical rules and laws were, she got dismissed. I find it unlikely that she was a prostitute or was extremely promiscuous, because she was like out in the open, and there's a lot of different cues there that says that something happened in her life to put her in this situation. What her part to play in that, I don't know, but that happens in life sometimes. You end up in a situation, either from your own doing. We can't bypass the fact that we get ourselves into stuff sometimes, but sometimes it's just not of our doing. Things just happen. But he's pointing out her past to give her an indication, I see your past, even if you don't tell me what your past is. When we're coming before God and we're to come to him with a contrite heart and openness and honesty and prayer, we must know that he sees our past. It benefits us none to hide ourselves from him. Yes, we can hide our reality from each other. But when it comes to God, realize if you are believing that he loves you, that is inclusive of your past. He loves you knowing exactly who you were, who you are, and who you can be. Verse 19, once again, she says unto him, Sir, I perceive thou art a prophet. Now we're going to dig into this other point about the past. Our first point was we want to make sure that we know that our past doesn't restrict God. But family, there's another part about the past that I want us all to get a grip on. This view in particular was the one that stuck most with me as God dealt with me about the past. It is this: we have to be conscious and careful about the way we view others' past in determining whether or not they are worthy of God. Amen. We must be clear, and we must stay far away from having anything in our heart, any part of our view that looks at another person's past and make a determination on whether or not we believe or deem that they are worthy of God. If you were to look back up at that woman of Samaria, verse 9. Yes, verse 9. Notice this. If you were to read verse 9 closely, it says, Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which is a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Verse 9 in the Amplified says, The Samaritan woman said unto him, How is it that you, being a Jew, say this with me, ask me, a Samaritan, and a woman, for a drink? That's two separate things. In the King James Version, it says it, but it says a woman of Samaria. So the way it's worded there has you focused on Samaria. But the Amplified Bible clears that up. It says, I am a Samaritan and I'm a woman. I'm a Samaritan and I'm a woman. Back into history. We already know why the issue of being a Samaritan would be a concern. Because he's a Jew. And they don't have any dealings with those folks that, okay, you believe in God, but you also worship pagan idols. But the woman side of it was that back in those days, the male teachers, those kind of folks, they weren't really allowed to talk to women openly in public. So not only is she of Samaria, but she's got another strike against her that the world would say, that culture would say, she's not worthy of Christ even engaging in conversation with. How do we do that sometimes? Well, we identify people by their past. If somebody does something good, it might be news for the day. If somebody does something bad, that news follows them for a lifetime. How would that sound? Consider this. In her case, she was both a Samaritan and a woman. But in our case, looking at people, we may say they both smoke and drink. They both curse and lie. They cheat and steal. Us keeping tally of the mishaps and the wrongs of other people is not the best use of our time here on earth. Amen. When I think about that, I know in my heart that Jesus is pushing us to understand that other people's past is not an issue to him, but we can make it an issue to us. And if we make it an issue to us, that unity, that harmony, that togetherness, that brotherhood that he's looking for us to develop, it won't happen as easily. It'll come difficult because we'll make cliques. We will start division where there should be none. But let's go on into this some more. Let's read down verses 20 through 27. Our fathers, the Samaritan woman is talking, our fathers worship in this mountain, and ye say that Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. The woman said unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will teach us all things. And verse 26, read that with me. Jesus said unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. Jesus says, I who am talking to you right now, and the one that you're talking about is to come. Jesus plainly reveals himself to a woman that society would think that's an outcast. There are not many people in the Bible, to my recollection, please study it for yourself, that Jesus so plainly stated, I am Jesus. But he tells a woman of Samaria that. If Jesus felt it necessary or comfortable or it felt it okay to speak so plainly to her, who are we to say that anybody else is not worthy of hearing what God has to say to them? Give me the Message Bible, please. Let's dig into something else really quick. We're going to go down through verse 27. Let me hold this one again. Let's read verse 27 through 29. And then we'll bring this plane in for a landing for today. And upon this came his disciples and marveled that he talked with the woman. There, come back. Jesus is talking to this woman of Samaria. These are the disciples, the believers, the church folk. Oh, we coming at each other, right? And upon this came his disciples and marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no man said, they didn't have the nerve to say this, they just thought it, what seekest thou? Or why talkest thou with her? 28 says, the woman left her water pot and went her way into the city and saith to the men, come and see a man which told me all things that I ever did. Is not this the Christ? The beauty of this is something that the Message Bible shows us. Remember, here comes the disciples. They come back from getting meat or lunch, and they're like, hey, why is Jesus talking to this? He know we don't have no dealings with these people. And a woman at that. The Message Bible of that section of Scripture reads like this. Just then his disciples came back, and they were shocked. They couldn't believe that he was talking with that kind of woman. With that kind of woman. Who don't that sound like the way we can get sometimes? You don't know how she is. You don't know what she's done. You don't know what his past is. You don't know what he's like. I grew up with him. God does not place his value on a person based on that person's past. He predetermined the value. The I am predetermined the value. Who are we to change it? I can't believe that he's talking to that kind of woman. That kind could be anything that you could even imagine that the world would consider unworthy. They were shocked. They couldn't believe he was talking with that kind of woman. No one said what they were all thinking, but their faces showed it. Say this with me. But their faces, showed it. Listen to the next verse in the Message Bible. It says, the woman took the hint and left. She took the hint and left. Family, she took the hint and left. A woman in need of Christ. A woman standing before Christ. A woman whose life can be forever changed by the beauty of Christ. Because she came in the presence of believers that shunned her, that showed on their face, that made her feel unwelcome. She took the hint and left. God said to me, Jesus thought her precious enough to speak to her. Who were the disciples to turn their nose up at her? How dare they? But more important than that, many people, instead of feeling the love of God, when they come into the church, when they come into the presence of believers in public, instead of feeling the love of God, they are made to feel uncared for, unwanted, and undesired. She took the hint and left, not because of what they said to her, but the simple look on their face. The way you look at me because I came in here wearing the only clothes I had, knowing that God tells me to come just as I am, but because my dress is a little too short, because I may be wearing a tattoo or two, because I have a piercing or so, you snub your nose at me and I take the hint. But how you come makes no difference to me because the I am was before you ever were. Just come.
Amen.
God says many people, instead of feeling the love of God when they step into the church or walk up to a body of believers in public, are made to feel unwanted, undesired, uncared for. They are made to feel as if they are a burden on those believers and not worth the time of day. And when they get that hint from my people, that hint is conveyed in the minds of the person getting misused and mistreated, that's the way I am, God says. And that is nothing could be farther from the truth.
Amen.
Every person that comes before you as a believer should receive the love of God that says you are forever welcomed into the kingdom. We cannot look at others' past and make the determination that God himself has not made. We shouldn't take the past and construct it into a view that a person is not worthy of God and his love and everything he has to offer.
Amen.
The last part of what God shared with me is, in addition to that not being us, we must be clear that we see the conclusion of the whole matter. And that conclusion is this. Just so you know, when we go back through this next time we're together, we're gonna continue from where we're stopping now. But this woman of Samaria, even though she takes the hint and leaves, she does come back. But God tells me not everybody comes back. He says the woman returns back to Jesus' presence, but some that we push away may never come back. I can't live with myself knowing that. That shouldn't be okay with me as a believer. The simple fact that I force a person to wear the label of their past and use that as something that barricades them from receiving the love of God cannot be my reality. I refuse to make it my reality. And I ask that you refuse to make it your reality. We are a church of believers. And if by any chance we've fallen short of that, then starting today, we shall be a church of believers. Everybody that walks through those doors are welcome. What they are dressed in doesn't matter. Amen. What matters is that they came. Amen. What's dressed upon their skin doesn't matter. Amen. What matters is that they came. How many people they've been with in their life doesn't matter. Amen. It matters that they came. Amen. That they smoke, that they drink, doesn't matter. Amen. What matters, people of God, is that they came. Amen. Amen.
We pray that today's message was a blessing to you. If you would like to help us further expand the vision, simply text the word GiveRTM to the number 41444 or visit us online at www.revealingtruth.org. Now remember, Jesus loves you.